Well, the moment, the historical moment, is clearly right for my recent book, Why Marx Was Right. I mean, it's a clear intersection of a book and a historical moment. Though I didn't actually sit down to write this book because of the crisis of capitalism. Once again, I rarely have that clear cut an idea of why I'm writing, but clearly, looking back, that must have fed into the book a great deal. 10 years ago, on the brink of the new millennium, Marxism was finished, grand narratives were finished, history was effectively over, even in a certain sense philosophy was over. We were post-ideological, post-metaphysical, post-religious, and what we had just 10 years ago really was a sort of history frozen and arrested in a kind of rather piecemeal pragmatism that believed that capitalism was the only game in town now and would be for this foreseeable future. A year later, with the World Trade Center tragedy, everything changed. New grand narratives got started up, and then an almighty crisis of the capitalist system. And what happens, I think, when the capitalism hits a crisis is that it makes it newly perceptible as a system. Normally it's just the invisible air we breathe. We can't even objectify it. Capitalism, a crisis in capitalism, does what Marx himself did, ironically, which was to show this way of life up as a determinate system with a certain history, very recent, working by certain laws, and so on. And that's the cue I take, as it were, for this recent book. There are many ways you can write a book on the relevance of Marxism today, or socialism. I thought the most interesting rhetorically was to put myself in the shoes of as it were, the average person who feels that Marxism is irrelevant or offensive or authoritarian or backward-looking, and just to try to respond to each of these criticisms. So the book takes a familiar criticism of Marxism, that it's tyrannical, or it's deterministic, or it reduces everything to economics, or it's hopelessly utopian, and tries specifically to respond to these complaints. The reader pretty well is the imagined reader, the implied reader, is somebody. Well, not just an average person with an average response to Marxism, but actually somebody with a fairly hostile response to it, as so many people have. The book tries to show that that most of those criticisms are largely unfounded. Indeed, that of all modern thinkers, Marx is perhaps the most astonishingly travestied and caricatured, that the common image that people have of his work is in many ways light years away from what he actually wrote. So the work is, in a sense, the book is a kind of work of demystification, among other things.